Good morning, everyone. Welcome everyone to this public hearing held today in Dallas by the Assassination Records Review Board. The Review Board is an independent federal agency that was established by Congress for a very important purpose: to identify and secure all the materials and documentation regarding the assassination of President John Kennedy and its aftermath. The purpose is to provide to the American public a complete record of this national tragedy, a record that is fully accessible to anyone who wishes to go see. The members of the Review Board, which is a part-time citizen panel, were nominated by President Clinton and confirmed by the United States Senate. I am John Tunheim, chair of the board. I'm also the Chief Deputy Attorney General from Minnesota. The members of the board, to my right, Dr. Henry Graff, who is Professor Emeritus of History at Columbia University. Dr. Kermit Hall, who is Dean of the College of Humanities at The Ohio State University in Columbus. To my left, Dr. Anna Nelson, who is Professor of History at the American University in Washington, D.C., and Dr. William Joyce, who is Associate Librarian at Princeton University. And then to my far left is the Executive Director for the Review Board, David Marwell. We have additional staff members here today that I'd just like to mention their names briefly, because they'll be here helping us with the hearing today. Cheryl Walter and Tracy Scheikoff, Jeremy Gunn, and Tom Samolek. Also with us today is our liaison from the National Archives, Mr. Steve Tilley. The major responsibility of the Review Board is to review secret federal government records and decide which records are to be made public immediately and which records will have postponed release dates. And we expect that review process to begin within 3 months. Today, however, the Review Board is in Dallas for a different purpose. Our focus today is a search for additional assassination records. We are seeking input about materials that are related to the assassination, where such material may be located, and why the material is relevant. We are holding this hearing in Texas because we believe there are records in this area, in this state, that are essential to a complete record of this event. And I want to point out and ask you to remember that the Review Board has been charged with the responsibility of securing a complete record of the assassination and its aftermath. The Review Board is not reinvestigating the assassination of President Kennedy. Our purpose really is to lift the veil of secrecy that has surrounded the records of the assassination and the follow-up investigations, and to be very open with the public about our activities. Because in the final analysis, it is really up to the American people to decide for themselves what happened nearly 31 years ago in Dallas. The Congress has determined that it's time to make complete the public record of the assassination. The review board is here today to carry out that mandate. And we appreciate the help of all of our witnesses today toward that end. Let me just review very briefly some ground rules for our hearing. We will recess today at 12:30 p.m. and reconvene at 2 p.m. We don't intend to go beyond the hour of 4 p.m. this afternoon, and we may finish earlier if the schedule allows us to do so. We're asking each witness to provide testimony to us for no longer than 10 minutes. At the close of each testimony, the board may wish to ask questions, members of the board may wish to ask questions of the witness. In order to keep moving and to allow all who wish to testify an opportunity to speak, I may ask some witnesses to cut their testimony short. We will accept anyone's written testimony for the hearing record, which we will keep open for a short period of time to allow people to send follow-up testimony in to us. We will publish a transcript of this hearing that will be available to the public. I thank you all for your assistance and for your interest, and I'll ask Mr. Marwell to introduce our first witness.
Is Mr. Jim Mars here? Mr. Mars?
Good morning, Mr. Mars.
Good morning. Mr. Chairman, lady, gentlemen. First off, my name is Jim Mars. I am a native of Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. I'm a journalist, and as such, I've worked for several Texas newspapers, including more than a decade in the nearby Fort Worth Star Telegram. During my career, I had the opportunity to meet many of the key characters of the JFK assassination saga. As a college student, I was in the Carousel Club, met Jack Ruby prior to the assassination. Also have interviewed Marguerite Oswald, Maureen Oswald, Jean DeMorne Shields, General Edwin Walker, many others, including the Evening Plaza witnesses, police, and government officials. Since 1976, I taught a course on the Kennedy assassination at the University of Texas at Arlington. And of course, my book, Crossfire, The Plot to Kill Kennedy, was the basis for the Oliver Stone movie, JFK. Now, having established who I am, since I'm on the up to plate first, let me welcome you to Dallas. And if you have not been here before, let me assure you that you're going to find Dallas a very hospitable, friendly place. I hope that you stay here. It's very enjoyable. As I'm sure you're all becoming very aware, the JFK assassination is indeed one of the world's greatest murder mysteries. The more you study this case, the less you know for certain. The medical evidence, which should be the best evidence, is in total disarray. Even eminent medical authorities cannot agree on what this evidence is, much less what it means. Living eyewitnesses have had their testimony challenged due to the number of years that have passed. Even the physical evidence and primary FBI reports have come under fire, and rightly so. In my own investigations, I've found too numerous instances of FBI reports which do not accurately reflect what witnesses tried to tell them and other activities which were conducted in a manner to incriminate Lee Harvey Oswald. But to get to the crux of the case, I would like to present you this morning with what I consider to be the smoking gun of this case. And it's available right now. It's in the public record. And it can be found on page 193 of the Warren Commission transcript of January the 27th, 1964. This is well before they got into their investigative phase, well before they reached any permanent conclusions. Understand that the Zapruder film established that the shooting sequence occurred within 6 seconds, and the FBI laboratory established that it took 2 seconds just to cock and fire the Oswald rifle. This means that it was only possible for 3 shots to be fired within the time frame of the shooting. 1 shot struck Kennedy in the head reportedly and fragmented, and the 2nd shot reportedly missed and nicked a bystander by the name of James Cave near the Triple Underpass. This leaves only 1 shot to account for 7 wounds to both Kennedy and Combs. Now, this 1 bullet strike, known as the single bullet theory, is pretty ridiculous. But for the sake of argument, let's look at this government's premise. The Warren Commission report stated President Kennedy was first struck by a bullet which entered the back of his neck and exited through the lower front portion of his neck. The bullet passed through Kennedy's neck and struck Combs. They even show us a nice little diagram of the bullet passing through Kennedy's neck. problem here is that at no time did a bullet traverse President Kennedy's neck. You can see the death certificate plainly states that a wound occurred in the posterior back at the level of the third thoracic vertebra, which is between the shoulder blades. This is marked on the autopsy face sheet clearly, and is marked at the bottom, verified and signed by Dr. George Berkeley, Kennedy's personal physician. Siebert O'Neill, FBI report of the autopsy says Dr. Humes located an opening which appeared to be a bullet hole which was below the shoulders and 2 inches to the right of the middle line of the spinal column. It's all right there. Secret Service agent Glenn Bennett, in his typed notes made from handwritten notes made less than an hour after the shooting, said, "I saw the shot hit the president about 4 inches down from the right shoulder," the exact location. Officer Clint Hill from the Secret Service, who was the only agent to react that day to the Warren Commission, said, they asked, "Did you see any other wound than the head wound?" He said, "Yes, sir, I saw an opening in the back about 6 inches below the neckline to the right-hand side of the spinal column." Available today in the National Archives are Kennedy's bloody shirt and jacket, both of which show a bullet hole low in the back to the right of the midline of the spinal column. The bullet struck President Kennedy in the back. Now, back to page 193, January 27, 1964, Warren report. We hear their own chief counsel, J.D. Rankin, state, "It seems quite apparent now, since we have a picture where the bullet entered in the back, that the bullet entered below the shoulder blade to the right of the backbone, which is below the place where the picture shows the bullet came out the neckband of the shirt in front. You've got a bullet low in the back, and you've got a bullet wound in the throat. If you connect these two wounds, and I assure you they do not connect, but again, I'm going with the government's own documents here. If you connect those, that is an upward trajectory. And as anybody knows, simple physics, a high-powered supersonic missile cannot travel upward and then twist in midair and come back down to strike over the top. This document not only shows the lie of the single bullet theory, but shows that the Warren Commission, an official body of the U.S. government, knew it was a lie in January of 1964. And yet they chose to show us a little diagram of a bullet going through the neck and report to us that the bullet went through the neck and did not cause any problems. Thank you. Now, I cannot overemphasize the importance of this point, because if the single bullet theory falls, as it does based on the statement from the Warren Commission's own chief counsel, then the lone assassin theory also falls, and we're into conspiracy just like the House Select Committee on Assassinations concluded in 1970. It's this type of information which has trickled out over the past 31 years and has led researchers and the vast majority of the American public to disbelieve the government's lone assassin theory. So now we must treat the subject of conspiracy seriously. For this reason, it is especially important for you people on the Assassination Records Review Board to look closely at the question of conspiracy and the government records which might contain evidence of such. I think, lady and gentlemen, that you're going to find you're dealing with two conspiracies here. One was the conspiracy to kill the president, and it obviously was quite successful. Who did it? Who committed it? How many gunmen? From which trajectory? How many shots? We don't know. That's what's being debated. And I'm not sure that you're going to find answers to those questions in these government records that you're looking for. But the second conspiracy was the conspiracy to cover up the truth of the first conspiracy. And this one was not quite so successful. Today, there's very much evidence to show that officials high within the U.S. government committed acts designed not to find truthful answers, but rather to hide the truth from the American public. For example, consider yourselves detectives. You arrive on the crime scene, and here's the victim's body. The uniformed police present you with 4 suspects. By the way, they tell you, we caught suspect number 4 destroying evidence, withholding evidence, altering evidence, fabricating evidence, and intimidating witnesses. Now, who are you going to believe committed the crime? Suspect number 4. And in this case, suspect number 4 represents persons within the federal government of the United States. The crimes mentioned have been documented. So the government that we turn to for information on this case includes some of the very suspects in the case. With this in mind, I would ask you to watch very carefully for misdirection, obfuscation, deceit when dealing with these government documents. Now, briefly, I'd like to turn to the central character of the assassination, Lee Harvey Oswald. The governments and its apologists continue to claim that any investigation into the Kennedy assassination is a waste of time because Lee Oswald, acting alone, was the person responsible for the assassination. If this is true, and I hope I just disproved that by showing you that it was impossible for the single bullet theory to work, and therefore it's impossible for one single assassin. But if it is true, then why should there be anything classified in this case? If it was one lone nut at the wrong place at the wrong time, the Cold War is over, and any intelligence agents from the 1960s have probably already retired. There is no longer any need for secrecy in this case. Or is there? Let me share with you this brief thing. First, I want to point to two documents. The first is a memo from J. Edgar Hoover to the Office of Security of the State Department. It's dated June 3rd, 1960. In this memo, which was also sent to the Office of Naval Intelligence, Hoover writes, says there is a possibility that an imposter is using Oswald's birth certificate. Any current information the Department of State may have concerning the subject will be appreciated. What a bombshell. We were told that nobody within the government paid much attention to Oswald, and yet here's a document showing that no less than J. Edgar Hoover personally was aware of Lee Harvey Oswald 3 years before the assassination, and that he had reason to suspect that someone was posing as Oswald, indicating a possible intelligence connection. Now listen to the words of Oswald's mother, Marguerite, in an interview reprinted in Exhibit 1808 of the Warren Commission volumes. Lee was 60 years old when he wanted to enlist in the Marines. The circumstances in which he chose this elite branch of service, in my opinion, are in glaring contradictions to the reports according to which Lee frequented the communists at this time and was himself a Red and admirer of Karl Marx. For my part, taking into consideration what I know about the life of my son, I think that on the contrary, he was recruited by the CIA, and he was sent by this organization to Russia and then to Dallas to infiltrate subversive organizations and, who knows, to expose a conspiracy against Kennedy. Now, there is evidence to support this idea. It is well documented that Oswald left a note styled as a warning with the FBI 2 weeks prior to the assassination. Despite claims that the note warned FBI agents to leave Oswald's wife alone or he would take action, it has been established that an FBI official in Dallas ordered this note destroyed after the assassination. This was a blatant act of destruction of evidence and leaves the impression that the note must have contained something other than a threat against the FBI, because if it had, I think we all know it would have been printed on the front cover of Life magazine. Now, this is Oswald adds. This is a theory, but it seems to me that it conforms to my son's conduct from the day in 1954 when he came home accompanied by an officer in uniform. This officer told me that the country needed boys like Lee, alert, educated, and loyal, and that I should let him enlist in the Marines despite his youth. I hesitated a little and then gave my consent. This sounds like the start of a career in intelligence, and other bits of evidence only give further support to this idea. I have a list of these, and I'll leave this with you. The 201 file, personnel file that was discovered within the CIA, the recently released documents from the Soviet Union, which clearly show that the Soviets considered Oswald a spy, the ease with which Oswald received passports both before and after his trip to Russia, the fact that he used the word microdots in conversation with his co-workers, which is a spy method, of course, his possession of a tiny Minox spy camera which carried a serial number that showed it was not commercially available. So we see that beginning with the 1960 Hoover warning, we see the very real possibility that there may have been more than one Lee Harvey Oswalds. Within the Warren Commission volumes are school records showing that during the fall semester of 1953, Oswald attended 89 days at Beauregard Junior High School in New Orleans, missing only one day. Yet there are also records showing that during the same period, Oswald attended 66 days at public school number 44 in New York City. One person cannot be in the two separate places at the same time. Officially, the Oswalds moved from New York to New Orleans in early '54, and yet there are some people, including Mr. William Timmerer, who has told us that as a youngster he met Oswald when he lived in Stanley, North Dakota. Now, Timmerer and others may have been mistaken, but on two separate occasions, in a Moscow interview with reporter Eileen Mosby and in talking to New Orleans Police Lieutenant Francis Martello in the summer of 1963, Oswald himself referred to his move to North Dakota. And yet there's no record. In the official record, there's no notice of him being in North Dakota. Finally, I'll leave you the story of Oswald attending W.C. Strickling Junior High School in Fort Worth. Both his mother and his brother Robert told the Warren Commission that Lee entered junior high school in Fort Worth, and Robert specifically named Strickling Junior High School, and yet records presented by the Commission clearly show that Lee entered junior high school in New York, where he and his mother had moved in August of 1952. There was no further mention of Strickling Junior High. However, just very recently, we located and spoke with a Mr. Frank Cudlady, who now lives in Waco, just south of here. In 1963, Mr. Cudlady was the assistant principal at W.C. Strickling High School. He said that the day after the assassination was Saturday, his principal ordered him to go to the school and provide FBI agents with records on Lee Harvey Oswald. He said he handed over a file of school records to the FBI. There is no mention of these records in the Warren Commission report or volumes. Mr. Cudlady told us that this was the first time since 1963 that anyone had even asked him about these records. And ladies and gentlemen, this is one of my main points. There has yet to be a true and full investigation of this case. So I hope you see now how extremely vital it is to release all the records pertaining to Oswald, even things so minute as his school records. There are thousands. Your job is not as investigators. However, there are thousands of investigators in this country, private citizens who are spending their own time and money to solve this case. They deserve full disclosure from their own government, especially in light of the fact that the government, its apologists, still maintain that there's nothing amiss with the assassination story. I hope in my own small way I've shown you the need to produce the documents necessary to bring the assassination case to a truthful conclusion. Particularly we need of Oswald's early school records in Fort Worth, New York, and New Orleans. We need all medical records, all military records, all employment, Social Security, and tax records. I know there's been some controversy over whether his tax forms have been released. I mean, surely we can see his tax forms. Cold War is over. There can no longer be any justifiable excuse of national security in holding back assassination material. The only possible security involved would be for those who do not want the truth of the assassination revealed to the public. It's time for consideration and embarrassment to the FBI, or the CIA, the Pentagon has long passed. It's now time for the government to open its files on one of the most dramatic events in this nation's history. And you people are the ones that I think who can affect this turn to full and honest disclosure, and I thank you for your time with us.
Thank you, Mr. Mars. Members of the board have any questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate your being here. Is Dr. Murrah here?
My name is David Murrah. I am Associate Director of Libraries and Director of the Southwest Collection at Texas Tech University in Lubbock.
Good morning, Dr. Murrah.
Mr. Chairman and others, I appreciate the opportunity to tell you about the Kennedy assassination materials housed at the Southwest Collection at Texas Tech University. The Southwest Collection is a major historical repository for the American Southwest, and within that capacity, the repository has received over a number of years donations of personal papers and other materials from former Texas Attorney General and Texas Tech alumnus Wagner Carr. As you probably know, Mr. Carr served as Attorney General of Texas from 1963 to 1967. Shortly after the assassination of President Kennedy, Mr. Carr began his own investigation, but subsequently acquiesced to federal authorities as well as the Warren Commission, and became liaison to the Warren Commission. In that capacity, Mr. Carr acquired copies of relevant documents from a number of sources, including Dallas Police Files and Dallas County Sheriff Bill Decker's report. Shortly after the conclusion of the Commission's work, in June of 1967, Mr. Carr sent copies of this material, which comprised about 2,500 items, to the Southwest Collection for inclusion with other papers and material that he had already donated. This material was inventoried by staff within months of its receipt and consequently was made available to the public and has been available to the public for nearly 3 decades, and I've furnished to you a copy of that inventory from our files. It's attachment A to my prepared remarks. However, to the best of my knowledge, the collection received very little use until the release of the Oliver Stone living JFK in late 1991. It's also my understanding that Mr. Carr furnished the same set of materials to other universities in the state, but I cannot confirm that other than through hearsay know that University of Texas and perhaps Texas A&M and another university or two received the same set of materials. In 1988, Mr. Carr made another large donation of his personal and political papers, which also included another set of the Kennedy assassination materials, also photocopies, as was the first donation. Much of this donation duplicated the 1967 material, and I've furnished to you a portion of that inventory as well. Other items in this particular donation were original materials and included letters written to Carr during his involvement in the investigation, as well as notes taken by Carr and his assistant Robert Davis during witness interrogations and news clippings dating from the 1960s through the late 1970s. In July 1991, the Southwest Collection listed the Carr papers online through the OCLC Bibliographic Utility, which links 13,000 libraries around the world. This listing carried computer searchable subject headings such as the John F. Kennedy assassination, Lee Harvey Oswald, Jack Ruby, and J.D. Tippit. Yet, to the best of my knowledge, this wide dissemination to the scholarly community produced no inquiries from the public at large. Extensive use of the Carr papers by assassination researchers did not occur until the release of the movie JFK and the publication of a story in the February 6, 1992 issue of the Dallas Observer, which called attention to Texas Tech's possession of the Wagner Carr papers. The Southwest Collection was soon besieged by assassination researchers as well as the curious general public. In the interest of security and conservation, the Southwest Collection then microfilmed every document from the Carr papers pertaining to the assassination. Great care was taken to compare the two sets of assassination materials in order to eliminate duplication and to create as complete set as possible, and I furnished to you Attachment D, which is an inventory of the microfilm set. It is our policy to sell copies of that microfilm on request. To date, we've had no requests for the film. I've also attached representative pages from the Carr papers, which are examples of the various kinds of material that are included. The Southwest Collection also holds material which pertains to the assassination in the papers of the late former Congressman George H. Mahon and in the papers of Dallas broadcaster Gordon McClendon. Mr. Mahon was in, I believe, the fourth car behind the president's vehicle during the parade, and he promptly recorded his memories of that, and we have those original comments within his papers. And the McClendon papers are the broadcast of radio station KLIF as they were recorded as the radio station covered the events at that time. In addition, the Southwest Collection has done extensive oral history interviews with Wagner Carr pertaining to the assassination. After the initial flurry of interest shortly after the release of the movie, user interest has declined sharply. But one researcher did call me from out of state to inquire about the materials, and in the conversation he had mentioned he had written 6 books on the Kennedy assassination. I responded, "That's great," and I proceeded to tell them that we had put on microfilm the papers that we had in case that he wanted to acquire the reels. His response was as follows: "That's good to know, but I hate to ask a dumb question, but what is microfilm?" Well, in summary, the Kennedy assassination materials housed at Texas Tech have been available to the public for at least 26 years, and yet until the JFK movie was released, little use was made of it. I would suggest to you that careful and meticulous scholars would have and should have utilized this material years ago. Careful and meticulous scholars do not have to be told the definition of microfilm. I would also add that Texas Tech University would be pleased to furnish to this board the microfilm copy of the assassination material, which we hold and will do so upon your request. Thank you again for the opportunity to share with you about all of that.
Thank you, Dr. Murrah. Other questions? Mr. Joyce?
David, are any of the collections in your repository closed in any way and unavailable for research?
None of these materials are closed. We do have restricted collections, but none pertain at all to the subject.
And are you aware of any additional material that might be related to these collections, but that is still in private hands?
I am not a person.
What percentage of what percentage of your documents are originals? That is, there's only one copy and it's your third collection, would you say? You mentioned some correspondence in here.
Right.
A lot of original documentation.
Well, most of the material is photocopied and is not original. The only things that are original are the things that were created as part of the personal papers of Wagner Carr, including his diary, relative correspondence and inquiries and so forth, and as well as his own notes within the Wagner Carr papers. Within the Mahon papers, it's all original.
Well, if some of his personal papers are there and they're original, obviously that's valuable.
Right.
I was just curious to know how much of it was.
In regards to the whole of what we have, only a small percentage is original.
Dr. Murray, I have just a couple of points. What is the total volume of documents or pages that the university has that are relevant to the assassination?
All right, I would refer you to item B2 and the material I have. If you have that before you, the attachments to my remarks. I'm sorry, let me back up and refer you to item A2. A1, the inventory for the 1967 donation, 2,479 items, which are listed there. And then the 1988 donation, there's 6,190 items, so we received about two-thirds more material there within the second donation that was not within the first. That is material pertaining directly to the Kennedy assassination. Out of a total donation of 55,000 items, which represent other Wagner Carr personal papers.
And I noticed in the materials, the Carr papers, a reference to autopsy records.
Yes, sir.
The autopsy records related to President Kennedy are exempt from the act. They're in the collection of the National Archives and closed. What kinds of materials are included in this reference to autopsy reports? Do you recall?
I have, it has been a while since I looked at that. One item that I do remember is the medical report that was filled out at the time of the autopsy. It is only a guess on my part, but this very well may be copies of material that otherwise has been restricted at other places.
But it's material that's open in your...
But it's always been open in our place. We received no instructions whatsoever at the time of donation that it was to be restricted at all.
They follow up with you.
All right.
Any further questions?
I'd just like to inquire, you say that the interest picked up after the movie JFK.
Yes, sir.
Has that continued steady or has there been some decline? Can you tell us?
It was very steady for about 3 months. I examined our use records and we had approximately 90 individuals who made use of that collection shortly after the release of the movie. No, after about 3 months it fell off quite rapidly, and I would say over the last year and a half or so we probably had no more than 2 or 3 inquiries.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Burra, and this type of information is exactly what we're looking for, and we appreciate you being with us today.
Thank you.
Adele Edison?
Good morning, Ms. Edison.
Thank you for your consideration, the opportunity to speak. I received a call from Mr. Marwell. My name is Adele Alvira Viscali Edison. I professionally, I have a bachelor's degree and a doctorate degree in physiology from the University of Chicago. My field is neurophysiology. I'm a neuroscientist. At the time, I'll be speaking about 1963 from personal experience. But before I do, I can give you a brief rundown of my background. I have been on the faculty and have done research at Tulane University School of Medicine, at LSU School of Medicine. In fact, in 1963, I was there as a third-year postdoctoral fellow of the National Institute of Neurological Diseases and Blindness of the National Institutes of Health. I've also been on the faculty of Rockefeller University, that was much later, St. Mary's Dominican College in New Orleans, Delgado College in New Orleans, University of Texas at San Antonio, and I'm currently teaching part-time at Palo Alto College, which is community college in San Antonio. I've also been associated with the Mind Science Foundation in San Antonio in the past. I'm seeking specific records, which I mentioned in my letter, and there are some others, but perhaps it would be best to give you an idea of the experience I had. I'm willing to give you also a narrative that I wrote in 1975 to give to my attorney in the event of my death, in case something happened to me, so there would be a record somewhere, because we could not obtain records from the Secret Service or the FBI, with whom I had an interview on November 24, 1963. In 1962, I tried to get back into my field of research after having 2 children. My children at that time in 63 were 7, 5, and 3. And I was offered the opportunity to apply for a postdoctoral fellowship. I had already had 2 years of postdoctoral fellowship support from that institute. That was at Tulane. And Dr. Sidney Harris of LSU's School of Medicine, Department of Physiology, suggested that I applied, and he told me in December that he had received a phone call from a Dr. Jose Rivera of the Institute telling him that I had been granted that award. Since my husband had been ill, that was a very important award. And by the time that these meetings occurred in April of the Federation of American Societies for Experimental Biology, which is an umbrella organization of 6 major biological societies, including the American Physiological Society, I had accomplished a certain amount of research on a volunteer basis, and I had enough results to report. And so I went to these meetings, which were held in Atlantic City, and it was there that I met the individual I'm going to be speaking about, Jose Rivera, who was manning a booth at the convention hall there. Well, to make this story shorter, I befriended him, or he befriended me. I was planning to go to Bethesda in Washington and visit with colleagues and friends at the NIH, and also to see the NIH. And so he had, in the course of our conversations and so on, invited me to his home to have dinner with him and his wife and daughter, and also to help me obtain motel space for my visit in Bethesda after these meetings, and to give me a sightseeing tour and so on. It turned out he had taught at Loyola University in New Orleans, and we knew some people in common who were at, for example, Dr. Fred Brasda, who was chairman of biochemistry at LSU Medical School, and a few other people. So, at any rate, I won't go into all the detail in the interest of time, but I will submit my narrative to you. I also wrote a short paper which was published in the Third Decade, which is a research journal for the assassination of President Kennedy, published and edited by Dr. Jerry Rose. This short article, was written by me under a pseudonym of K.S. Turner. I was trying to find one of the Secret Service agents because I have not yet received any records of my interview with them. Mr. Rivera, or Dr. Rivera, or Colonel Rivera, he also called himself, mentioned to me, and this is April 1963, 7 months before the assassination. On Monday night, April the 22nd, it turned out that his wife was a nurse and she was on duty at a hospital. And so we didn't go to dinner at his home, but rather he took me to Blanket's House of Beef in Washington. And it was there that he said to me, as we were waiting to be seated, he told me about his trips to Dallas and so on, and he said there's a very nice nightclub there, the Carousel Club, and the next time you're in Dallas, you should go there. And in a few moments later, he asked me if I knew Lee Oswald. I had never heard of Lee Oswald. I vaguely wondered if he was related to a boy I saw in high school whose name was Fred Oswald, and I went to high school in New York. And, but that was all. I said, no, I didn't know. And he said, well, he lived in Russia for a while, and he has a Russian wife and a child, and they're in Dallas now, and he's planning to come to New Orleans. And they're planning to come to New Orleans, and you should get to know them because they're a very lovely couple. Those are more or less exact quotes. I didn't think anything of it. We had dinner and so on and so forth. It was the next night, again, his wife apparently couldn't make dinner, and we were seated at this time, the Marriott, I think it's called the Twin Bridges, across the Potomac River. And there were several other things he asked me about, if I knew that John Abt, for example. Later, many years later, when that was the attorney that Lee Oswald asked to represent him. I didn't know John Abt either. But he did later on say to the effect that Oswald would, I presume he meant Oswald would call upon Abt to defend him. All of these things were only in retrospect that I put it together. But it was that Tuesday night which was the most devastating. We were sightseeing and we went all around Washington to the Cherry Blossom, the White House. Every time we toured around the White House, he asked me if I saw Caroline on her pony macaroni and all kinds of crazy nonsense, and I was beginning to think I was, an absolute madman. But the first indication he made of the death of the president was as we were approaching, getting near the White House the first time. He said, I wonder what Jackie will do when her husband dies. I said, what? And he said, uh-oh, I mean baby. What baby? Was what went into my mind. I didn't know she was pregnant. And he said, well, she might lose the baby. And then he began to talk about women having cesarean sections, and did I know whether they could have normal deliveries, vaginal deliveries, if they had cesarean sections, and went on like that. And I just wondered about what he was, maybe he did make a slip of the tongue or something. But at the Marriott, let me get back to that, and I'm sorry I digressed. It was after dinner, and he asked me to do a favor for him when I got back to New Orleans. And that was the subject of the note which I mentioned in the letter. He said that he had talked with this gentleman I guess it's all right to mention the name. I don't know if he had anything to do with the assassination or not, but he was a faculty member at Loyola, who apparently had been a friend of his, or was a friend. Winston de Mossberg, dictated the name, I think I misspelled it in the note. Tell him to call me when you get back there, and ask him when he's leaving New Orleans, because I heard he was leaving New Orleans, and so I wrote on the note, Winston de Mossberg called Dr. Rivera when leaving, and all my abbreviation from New Orleans. And in some more conversation, and he then asked me to write down a number, and which was 899-4244. And after that, he said, write down this name, Lee Harvey Oswald. It didn't ring a bell to me that that was the same name that he had mentioned the night before. And he said, tell him to kill the chief. And so underneath that part of the note, I wrote, in quotes, kill the chief. Now, let me explain. One more thing. When he saw me writing down the message, he said, no, don't write that down. You'll remember it when you get to New Orleans. The reference to chief, to me, meant NIH, because Rivera made this joke, or description, several times during these 2 days. He said, do you know why NIH is called a reservation? And I said, no. He said, because there are so many chiefs and no Indians. The organization, the internal organization of NIH is, at least it was then, and I presume it's the same now, was that different intramural research groups would have a chief of the section. For example, chief of the spinal cord section, chief of this or chief of that, and even the training grants and award section, of which Rivera was a part, had a chief, Elizabeth Hartman. And so all this time I thought that Oswald was a scientist and a friend of Rivera's. I couldn't understand about the Russian wife, because at that time they were citizens of our two countries, were not allowed to leave or to visit each other. And so on. I became very frightened, and I didn't understand what he was talking about, even though he had made references to assassination of the president, killing of the president. But he said, when he told me not to write down that part, he said, don't write it down, you'll remember it when you get to New Orleans. We're just blaming a little joke on him, presumably meaning Oswald. There were other references to the assassination, which he said, for example, after, he kept talking about it in this way. He would say, after it happens, it happens. What happens, you know, I don't know what he's talking about. After it happens, he would say, someone will kill him. Meaning, apparently the assassin was, I presume it was Oswald. Although I never considered him much later than Oswald did, but at any rate, Oswald, they'll say his best friend killed him. After it happens, the president's best friend will jump out of a window because of his grief. And there was such an event. About 2 weeks later, the former ambassador to Ireland jumped out of a window in Miami. His name was Van Stockdale. Although, again, at the time, I didn't really make connections.
This note is a note that you passed along to
Yes.
a government agent?
Yes. Then
Can you tell us about that?
Yes. On Sunday, November the 24th, I called the Secret Service. I had actually called the Secret Service in July, and I spoke briefly with Agent J. Calvin Rice. And I was going to go down there and tell him this incredible story, which was now I had I thought there was some sort of conspiracy to kill the president and putting it together. And then I thought they wouldn't believe me and I'd only make a fool of myself. And so I called him back and declined. But when the assassination actually did occur, I did go down there on Sunday, and they were very anxious to see me. And Mr. Rice told me not to sign in the register because I guess it was for protection or something. And so but to call him when I got to the lobby, and I went there. As we were walking to his office, Mr. Rice told me that they had just gotten word that Oswald had been shot. So it must have been shot him. And we went into his office where he introduced me to a burly FBI agent, a balding man. And I believe he might have been Orrin Bartlett. And the reason I say that is that his first name was definitely Orrin, because when he was introduced to me, I thought I had misheard. And I said, Owen, and he said, no, Orrin. And I thought of a pair, making some kind of association with the name. At any rate, I began to tell him my incredible story, and I was there for about 3 to 4 hours in their office. There were only 2 men there. J. Calvin Rice, Secret Service, who was a youngish man, about, I would imagine, 30s, early 30s. Not much taller than I was. I had small, Cuban, walking heels.
There were notes taken.
Well, he took some notes, but Mr. Rice was seated at his desk, and I was seated to his right. And the FBI agent remained standing most of the time. I believe he may have taped it, because every time Mr. Rice got up from his desk, there was a partition over there, for example, and there was a phone there, which they used, even though there was a phone on the desk. I didn't understand. But apparently there was some reason for that. So every time Mr. Rice got up to answer the phone or to use the phone, I noticed his hand would do this, and I would either hear a whirring, mechanical sound like a tape recorder or something. It may have been audio taped. At the end of the interview, when I was leaving, Mr. Rice asked the FBI agent who had been coming and going more or less, do you have the film and is the plane ready? And they were leaving. I thought they were going to Washington because the FBI agent had been introduced to me as being from Washington. But no, Mr. Rice said they were going to Dallas, and so presumably they were flying that night immediately, and he put his hat on and they were ready to leave, showing me out. Mr. Rice showed me out the door.
So what you're seeking is any kind of record of this interview?
Yes, what I'm seeking, and I have sought for about four times since 1975. My most recent request went in this summer. The interview, November 24th, 1963, there should be some record of it. Even if they thought I was completely out of my mind, there should be some record of it somewhere, either in the Secret Service or in the FBI office. The FBI agent made a call to someone very important to him, asking that Mr. Rivera be interrogated while I was there. In 1975, I consulted Mr. Jack Peebles, an attorney in private practice in New Orleans. He advised me to write under Freedom of Information Act to the FBI and to the CIA, because I sort of thought Rivera had some link to CIA. They had nothing. Mr. Peebles then wrote on August 28, 1975, to Mr. Frank Church, Senator Frank Church. Senator Church answered, but it was a rather perfunctory thank you. We'll use the information that your client has. Mr. Peebles did not, and I'll give you a copy of his letter, did not refer to me by identity, by name, because he was trying to protect me. But he said that my client I would be willing to send them tape recording or any materials they wanted, as long as my identity would be protected.
So let me just clarify here,
Okay.
so we understand it. It's any kind of record of this interview.
Right.
And possibly the note that you asked him.
The note which I gave to the FBI agent, I'm sorry I didn't read that.
I was just clarifying for the board. Any of the board members have any questions for Ms. Edison? Go ahead.
Yes, Dr. Edison, have you had any correspondence with Dr. Rivera since you had his hospitality?
I received a letter in early 1964. Remember, I was a postdoc at LSU. From Elizabeth Hartman, who was chief of the Training Grants and Award section, asking me to submit a progress report or a summary of my activities as a postdoc, a professional physicist, typical, which I sent to her. And I received a form letter, and I have a copy of that with me, a form letter with Jose Rivera's signature on it as executive secretary of the Training Grants and Award section.
But you had no
But
other...
it's thanking me for this progress report.
But you had no other correspondence?
But not any...
You
no,
weren't in touch
no.
with him to thank him for what
No.
he done?
Yeah. I did see him, let me tell you this much, in September, right after Labor Day, a couple of days after Labor Day, I was at LSU talking to a neurology
What
friend.
year are we in now?
1963,
63.
sorry. 1963, September after Labor Day, speaking with Dr. Greg Harris in the hallway. I'd gone for a drink of water. I looked down the hall and Rivera had just gotten off the elevator. And of course I watched him, and he didn't see me. He had very thick glasses, may not have seen at long distance. But when he was about 8 or 10 feet away, he noticed me, and he halted, and he almost stumbled, stepping backwards. He looked as if he had seen a ghost. And then he walked on. He said that he recovered by saying, "I've got to go see Fred Brad," so his friend had side cancer. It was a very, when you read my document, you'll see what happened.
Any further questions?
Dr. Edison, what is the current status of your FOIA request? Information?
I'll tell you, I wrote, it was in June, yes, in June. I can tell you one more thing. In 1984, I met an FBI agent in San Antonio. I'll give you his name in confidence because I don't want him, but he listened to everything he knew about this, and he suggested that I write a brief summary of my experiences. I wrote a seven-page summary. He submitted it with a covering letter to headquarters. I wrote about a year or so later to the FBI again with a request for Freedom of Information Act, any files on me and so on. And they replied they had nothing. We know they had something. So this is my concern. Why aren't these files available to me? I also request from this board that they examine any records pertaining to Jose Rivera, Colonel Rivera of the Army, and what his role was in all of this. I know something about him, that he had spent some time in Japan, for example. He told me that. That may have been there at the time Oswald was there. He knew Oswald somehow.
Thank you very much, Dr. Edison. Appreciate your sharing your information with us today.
Thank you very much.
The next witness will be Gary Mack.
Good morning, Mr. Mack.
Good morning.
You just start, or can you start this off?
Go right ahead.
Well, I trust you've got a copy of the letter that I sent. The areas that I've worked on since the mid-1970s are primarily media and photographs. And And I've run across some things that I have yet to find answers for, and I listed some of them here. The first one I want to ask you about, and urge you to poke around as much as you can, recordings of the Secret Service radio channels in the motorcade. There were at least 2, perhaps 3. There's a reference, I'm sorry I don't recall exactly where, but there's a reference that the Dallas police broadcasts were also monitored by the Secret Service. They had a center set up at the Office Hotel. It was then fed back to Air Force One out of left field, and then monitored back in Washington. Those recordings have never surfaced. There's an indication in the testimony from one of the Secret Service agents in the Kennedy car that he had referred to a transcript. Well, the transcript tells me there must have been a recording somewhere. So I would urge you to check with the Signal Corps or its successor agency or agencies to find out what happened to those transcripts and recordings. One of the reasons I suggest that is the agent questioning, Agent Kellerman, testified that he had his microphone on when the final shot or shots were fired. It would be, theoretically, another recording of at least part of the shooting. Number 2 on my list first came to my attention in Mark Lane's book, Rush to Judgment, in the mid-'60s, where he quoted Joe Long of KLIF Radio, one of the most popular stations in Dallas at that time. Joe said that the Secret Service confiscated some of their recordings and never returned them. I've confirmed that with several personnel at other stations who recall in the weeks immediately following the assassination numerous visits by Secret Service agents who asked for specific things, and in those days the material, films, and audio tapes and videotapes were turned over without receipts. And the recollection of the people in charge is that not everything they loaned to the Secret Service was returned. To my knowledge, there's no specific listing of material, and I think that should be pursued. When a film of Robert Oswald meeting with his brother Lee Harvey Oswald in custody is known to have been shot and has never surfaced, that concerns me. There's no indication that it was a sound film, but the fact that a film like that could vanish is very troubling to me. Number 3 on the list, attempts to conduct photo enhancements and blow-ups of one or more amateur photographs shot by witness Mary Mormon. Despite some of the accounts that have appeared in print, at the end of the day, Mary Mormon went home with her photographs. They were not confiscated from her, but they were borrowed while she was being questioned the day of the assassination. In the following months, she loaned the picture to the FBI at least 4 times. She retained signed receipts for those. She did get a letter to appear before the Warren Commission. She asked for a delay. She had twisted her ankle and could barely walk. And the Warren Commission indicated that they would recontact her, and she never heard from them again. So that's the only reason she did not testify. But she did loan her picture to the FBI, and they had told her it was for the Warren Commission and for their investigation. There's nothing in the record that indicates that the FBI or the Warren Commission ever did anything with her picture of the assassination. It is the only one known to exist that shows the grassy knoll at the time of the headshot. And it's just, it's astounding to me that a photograph like that could exist, was known to exist within minutes of the assassination. And yet there is no official interest in that photograph as far as the available documentation shows. We do have reports of other films and photographs that drew some interest right away, but not this one. And her recollection is, and it's supported by a friend of hers named Jean Hill, their recollection is that at some point in the days or weeks following, they were exhibited a giant blow-up of one of the other pictures she took in the sequence. And this blow-up was of the School of Depository moments before the assassination. They were looking at windows and trying to see if there were any figures in the windows. Their memory is that they never did see anything. But that tells me that there was official interest, at least on the part of the Secret Service, that they did some work on one or more of those pictures. And the record is blank. I know of no such documentation, and it must be somewhere. Number 4, Secret Service or FBI efforts to locate Cap Field, who may have photographed the assassination. That name came from a document that was released in the late 70s, and I tried to follow up on that at that time, contacting the college up in Denton, North Texas State University, and we went through records and just could not find any reference to this guy named Cap Field. There's just no way to tell where that trail went, but there's one document indicating that Cap Field may have taken one or more pictures that day. Number 5, Army or Signal Corps motion pictures of the JFK autopsy at Bethesda. I'm not an expert in this area, but I have been told that by a person who was familiar with the Bethesda room, that there were mountings for a motion picture camera. It was a teaching institution, at least that room was. And the standard autopsy procedure would certainly include an audio recording of the comments. I've never seen any reference to either one of those. And I would think that somewhere there have to be some recordings of what exactly was said. I think that would, pun intended, that would certainly be the best evidence about what they observed in Washington. Number 6, broadcast recordings of Dallas police radio channels. Several radio stations in Dallas at the time did monitor police broadcasts. Whether they recorded them or not, I've not been able to determine. Without getting into any great detail on the acoustics evidence, it is the belief of Dr. Bart, who did the work for the House Assassinations Committee, that those dictabells in evidence are not the originals. That's the one mistake he admits to. He says that he has told me and he's told others that when the House Committee showed him those dictabells, they said these are the originals, and they did not question that. After the controversy arose, his studies indicated that they have 2 hum tones, and that tells him they're not the originals. This was a theory of mine that I followed as closely as possible without being a scientist. Dr. Barger, I believe, is an honest, decent man. He stands by his work. His basic observation that was ignored by the National Academy of Science study is that the Dallas police radio system at the time was an FM system. When I called Dr. Louis Alvarez, who was the one on the National Academy of Science panel most involved with this, I asked him, was it an AM system or an FM system? He said, well, it was AM. They're all AM these days. I said, I'm sorry, it was an FM system. It was a relatively new system. How would that affect your findings? He said, Gary, if that's true, we'd have to start all over again. He asked me if I could document that. I cannot. The paperwork is gone, but I do know the names and phone numbers of some of the City of Dallas radio engineers who designed the system and installed it and maintained it. The acoustics issue, despite the difficulties, is far from a dead issue. It needs to be pursued, because as far as I'm concerned, while it's great that everybody's releasing documents, what you're doing has truly great value. At the end of all this work, the documents are going to give us bits and pieces of information, but I'm just not convinced it's going to solve the crime. I don't think it's going to tell us whether there was or was not a conspiracy to kill the president. The acoustics evidence could certainly do that. The other element about the acoustics evidence is that one area where Warren Commission member David Bellin and House Committee Staff Counsel Bob Blakey agreed is that the acoustics evidence should be pursued. In other words, the same analysis that was applied to the grassy knoll shot should be applied to the other 3 shots. If you trace the source of those shots, just like the grassy knoll shot, either it's going to lead to that window or it's going to lead to some illogical place. And that would be the way to settle this issue. It would be a real shame if the acoustics thing was just like hanging. It's one of the very few pieces of hard evidence left. Number 7, numerous still photographs of the Oswald emergency work shot by Dr. Carl Dockery. I first learned about Dockery's pictures from Michael Eddowes' book, The Oswald File. And I called Dockery and he confirmed it. His memory was that he had his camera with him. He shot an entire roll of film documenting what the autopsy surgeons, what the doctors were doing. He ran out of film and he borrowed a camera from someone out in the hallway, apparently a news photographer. And he had something like 6 or 7 rolls of film with him. And as best Dockery could remember, he shot a good 150 photographs. I have no idea where those are. He's never seen them. They were confiscated by Parkland Security and ultimately went to, I believe it was C.J. Price. And I made that phone call either to him or one other person, and they claimed they did not recall that. So, again, these may be FBI files. There is an FBI document indicating they were aware of this. I don't know if there's anything of any significance as far as changing history. I don't think it's properly documented. There certainly were no other photographs taken in the Oswald emergency wood. Finally, number 8, the numerous confessions in recent years by people who claim to have been involved with some aspect of the assassination. It's been a very frustrating area for me, in that I have spent a lot of time working on legitimate issues in this case, as have many other researchers. Since 1990, I have found that I have spent an awful lot of time trying to correct the historical record of some of these phony stories that come out. And without going through a list, or maybe I could provide you a list sometime in the future. The most significant story in recent years was Ricky White, the Roscoe White story. That story, and I could give you a stack of stuff this big. A friend and I have spent hundreds and hundreds of hours on this thing. It is a complete fabrication. It is my personal belief that everybody involved with that story knew it. I'll give you an example. A few days after the August 6, 1990 news conference, a friend of mine noticed a document in the office of Bud Fensterwald, who was the head of the Assassination Archives Record Center in Washington. Fensterwald had a report on his desk, an interview that had been conducted by Kevin Walsh with a man named Philip Jordan. Philip Jordan was the mysterious Mr. X, who Ricky White kept referring to. Philip Jordan was in a position to know whether that story was true or not. What he told Kevin Walsh was the story was not true. And yet, Fensterwald and others stood by as Ricky White claimed that his father killed Kennedy. And it's absolutely outrageous to me if these kind of things go on. I'm not sure there can be legislation to prevent it, but if that's part of your work, I would very, very highly, strongly urge you to come up with some legislation that would provide some criminal penalties for these people who come up with these phony stories. I was on a museum retreat for the past week and a half down in South Texas, and I got a call from one of the Fox stations with another one. Now we've got 4 coming up to the depository. It's never ending. These people get attorneys to find out whether they're going to be in trouble so they know exactly what they should or should not say. And it's just mind-boggling. On the one hand, those of us who research this case and who are amateurs and don't have formal training in this, we tend to think outside the borders. That is, overall, is good for this case because we're not locked into a certain way of studying something. But on the other hand, there are some profiteers and others who like the limelight and that kind of thing. It's just mind-boggling what's going on in the research community. When these stories come out, and those of us who know how to research and know how to look things up and know how to ask questions, when we look into this and say, you've got serious problems with this story, we are then painted as disinformation agents. Some of these people, and I don't wish to cast the research community with such a wide brush, but they want to seek the truth, but you better find the right truth or you're in trouble. I'm not locked into those people, and I wanted to at least offer my assistance with some of these phony stories, because you'll have a lot of work for you. I'd hate to see you get derailed with stuff that leads nowhere. And I think I'll leave it at that, and I will follow this up in the written.
Thank you, Mr. Mack. Questions?
It would be helpful in your written submission if you give us some details on the issues that you mentioned today.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Mr. Mack, your reference to the reference to Cap Field that you mentioned in your number 4, was that in an FBI record that you saw that in?
Yes, it was, and I believe it was in one of the documents that was released along with, and it might be the same one, that came out in late 77, early 78, that identified Charles Bronson as having taken the film of the assassination. That document went to Earl Bills at the Dallas Morning News, and Earl found Mr. Bronson. But Cap Field, and I remember his Cap Field is on that list. the only documentation. What I have found, living here and talking with people, is that there are a lot of people in the Dallas area who, for one reason or another, just would prefer not to come forward. I learned a story just a few weeks ago. A retired Kodak executive remembered that while they were processing Abraham Zapruder's film out in the Dallas office out by Love Field, that a woman had come in. This was a woman in her late 30s, a brunette, who had taken a picture of the assassination scene. And her picture was the first one out of the processor. And they were working on this because it's quicker to do stills than it was to move film. And he didn't catch her name, but he stood next to her while she was explaining her story to some of the federal investigators who were already there. She was running from Main Street up to Elm Street, across the grass, realized she wasn't going to get there close enough, stopped and took a picture. In the foreground were some people standing on the south curb of Elm Street. The Kennedy limousine was directly behind them. Directly behind the limousine was the depository building. When the picture came out of the processor, the first thing they noticed was the exposure was terrific. The focus was way, way off. It was virtually useless, and she was told that. Well, she apparently went home, and whether anyone even got her name or not is unknown. If this story is true, and I have no reason to doubt it, the man, we sought him out, not seek us out. Today, if we can locate that slide, and this was a color slide, computer enhancement can return it literally to almost the best clarity you could have had at the time. Because back in those days, nothing like that existed. The Kodak executive's name is Jack Harrison. Jack said they were pushing the technicians very hard to do whatever you can to sharpen this picture and improve it. And they just said, hey, that's not what we can do. So here's a woman with a potentially important photograph, a still photograph. What's especially interesting to me is that from the description of her position, what the picture showed, she may very well be the real Bush lady. That's an area in the research community that's very controversial at this point. Without going into any great detail, I do not believe that Beverly Oliver is the Bush lady. Or, let me rephrase that, she certainly could be, but the rest of the story is fabrication. My personal belief. What's happened, though, apparently, is the story from Jack Harrison that this woman existed. She's got a photograph that could have some important answers. It's probably sitting in a shoebox somewhere in her closet. She has no idea. And how do you find a woman? How do you get people to come forward? Maybe your work will do that.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question for Mr. Mack. Do you have any knowledge, Mr. Mack, given the time and effort you put into this enterprise, of any former public officials who took materials relating to the assassination that are now held in private hands that would otherwise be deemed public documents?
I have to think. It seems to me, yes. I don't know of any original material, if that's what you're asking. Several police officers kept copies of things, mostly photographs. I don't know of any original material. I have to think about that.
Well, could I ask Mr. Chairman that Mr. Mack, as part of the statement to provide to us, if you would speak to that issue, I would be most appreciative.
I'd be happy to.
I think just to clarify your point that we're looking for documents and might miss some of these questions. Actually, under the statute, the term document is very widely interpreted. And it means in some ways information that works in whatever form it may be. So that in fact, photographs in this instance would be regarded as proper material. So I just thought I would clarify that.
One comes to mind. A local photographer who worked for the NBC affiliate named Jimmy Darnell filmed the loading of the president's casket onto Air Force One. He filmed it from close range, and after he was done, a Dallas police officer came up to him and said, "You shouldn't be doing that, that's sacrilegious. Give me your camera." Jimmy had just joined the station and hadn't been in the business very long. He did turn over the camera, or gave him the film. And the officer
Jimmy knew the officer's name, and he told me the officer's name. I don't recall it. It'll come to me in a minute. I called him, and he had no knowledge of such a, he didn't recall doing that, and I'm not really surprised. It's not the kind of thing he would be enthusiastic to admit. He said that if he had done that, he would have given it to Chief Curry, which means he would have gone to the FBI. So the TV station filed a Freedom of Information request right away, got an answer within like 4 days that their files did not have any such film. Since there is such controversy, and legitimate controversy, I should add, about the condition of the president's body in Dallas versus the body in Washington, I doubt very highly there would be anything significant in this film but loading the body onto Air Force One. You never know. What else was on that film? It was also damaged. Just one that comes to mind.
Good question. Thank you, Mr. Mack. We appreciate your testimony.
I understand that Karen Clem is not here today. I'd ask Mr. Robert Vernon if he'd like to give us a statement at this time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Morgan. Appreciate it. There was one other gentleman I don't believe has arrived yet. When you had mentioned to me on the phone yesterday, maybe after lunch, I told him to take his time, but he's not here, so you'll see his name reflected in this transcription. I appreciate the opportunity to appear before you. Mr. Chairman and distinguished members of the board, my name is Robert G. Vernon. The gentleman that's supposed to be with me now is John R. Stockwell. He's late. I'm a television producer. Mr. Stockwell is a former CIA case officer. He's a noted author and screenwriter. We are here representing Truth Incorporated, which is a non-profit Texas corporation that was founded in 1989. Since their formation, Truth has conducted a private, unbiased investigation into the death of John F. Kennedy. Mr. Stockwell and I were hired in early 1992 to write and produce a television program and book highlighting the findings of Truth. Our findings are scheduled to be released in the immediate future TV, broadcast, home video, CD-ROM, and book form. The first participant in the JFK assassination discovered by Truth is a male African-American named Q.D. Erdy, U-R-D-Y. Mr. Erdy received immunity from the United States Department of Justice in 1992 in exchange for his testimony. Mr. Erdy testified that he was ordered by Jack Ruby to acquire high-powered rifles and scopes in the early fall of 1963. Mr. Erdy stated that he then stole 3 rifles from a ranch in West Texas. The theft of these rifles has been verified by the ranch owners. Retired Dallas police officer Tom Tilson testified that he and his daughter observed Jack Ruby and 3 men dressed in suits, ties, and hats taking target practice with rifles at a Dallas-Fort Worth firing range approximately 5 to 7 days prior to the assassination. No other part of Mr. Erdy's lengthy testimony has been substantiated, although he does claim to have further information and knowledge of the events surrounding the assassination, both before and after the fact. The second participant discovered by Truth is a male Caucasian Robert Tosh Plumley, a CIA pilot. Mr. Plumley has piloted and co-piloted clandestine CIA flights for over 31 years. He testified before the Church Committee in the 1970s, and his CIA escapades have been well chronicled in magazine articles, books, and congressional reports. Mr. Plumley testified before the Senate Foreign Relations Committee on August the 2nd, 1990, and again in May of 1991. His testimony under oath has been classified as top secret. Senator John Kerry served as chairman of the Senate Committee. John Weiner, I believe his name is, and Dick McCall, staff aides to Senator Kerry, questioned Mr. Plumley in relation to the Contra resupply network behind closed doors. Mr. Plumley testified to the U.S. Senate Committee and to Truth Incorporated that on the morning of November 22nd, 1963, he was a co-pilot on a top-secret flight supported by the CIA. Mr. Plumley's flight left Florida on November 21, 1963, and stopped in New Orleans and Houston before heading into Dallas, Texas during the early morning hours of November 22nd, 1963. Mr. Plumlee testified that Filippo Sacco, alias John Roselli, a known Mafia CIA double operative, was on board the plane to Dallas. Mr. Plumlee stated that Mr. Roselli departed the plane at Dallas Garland Airport shortly after 6:30 a.m. on the morning of November 22, 1963. Mr. Plumlee testified that he was informed that the flight was an abort mission and that their assignment was to stop the assassination attempt on Kennedy's life. Mr. Plumlee testified that he was told this by his superior officers, and he has identified those officers. Mr. Plumlee testified that he was present at Dealey Plaza on the South Knoll at the time of the assassination. In the spring of 1992, the late Joe H. West, the founder of Truth, 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 received a call from Beaumont, Texas FBI agent Zach Shelton. Agent Shelton requested an off-the-record meeting with Mr. West at a location between Houston and Beaumont. Agent Shelton and Private Investigator West also had a second meeting at which a noted Houston criminal attorney, Don Irving, was present. During the course of these meetings, Agent Shelton, a former member of the Organized Crime Task Force in Chicago, provided Mr. West and Attorney Irving with a lead on James E. Files, alias James E. Sutton, a male Caucasian from Chicago, currently incarcerated in the Stateville Correctional Center in Joliet, Illinois. Mr. Files is serving a 50-year term for the attempted murder of 2 police officers. His FBI rap sheet indicates a life filled with violent crimes. Agent Shelton informed Investigator West and Attorney Irving that the FBI had previously gathered information from an informant that Mr. Files has knowledge of the events that occurred in Dealey Plaza on November 22, 1963. Agent Shelton verified that Mr. Files was an associate and driver/bodyguard for one Charles Nicoletti, a known Mafia hitman from Chicago. Agent Shelton further stated that he had long suspected Chicago mob members Sam Giancana, Charles Nicoletti, and John Roselli were involved in the assassination of John F. Kennedy, but that he had no hard evidence to support his beliefs. On August the 16th and 17th, 1992, after an extensive search to locate the prisoner, Investigator West spent several hours each day questioning James E. Files. During the August 17, 1992 meeting, Mr. Files confessed that he was involved in the JFK assassination. Mr. Files confessed that he was present in Dealey Plaza and that Charles Nicoletti and John Roselli were also present in Dealey Plaza. Mr. Files further confessed that he had been recruited and worked for the CIA in the early 1960s, later becoming a driver for Charles Nicoletti of the Chicago Mafia. Investigator West died from complications following open-heart surgery in February of 1993, after filing a legal action to exhume the body of John F. Kennedy, which was filed in the 160th Judicial District of Dallas in the fall of 1992. On May 3, 1993, I visited James E. Files for the first time. Present with me was Mr. Barry Edelman, Vice President in charge of television development for Dick Clark Productions in Burbank, California. During our 4-hour visit, James E. Files confessed that he fired the fatal last shot into the right front temple of John F. Kennedy from a firing position located behind the wooden stockade fence on the infamous Grassy Knoll. Mr. Files confessed that he had fired a .222 shell at the president and that he left the empty casing on top of the fence. Mr. Files said that he had bitten down on the casing because that was a trait of his. He always placed the spent shells in his mouth after a job, as he called it. Files testified that his teeth marks were in the casing that he left behind in Dealey Plaza. Upon returning to Texas, we contacted a Mr. John Rodemaker, who I might point out is here today, of the Dallas area, after we found news clippings about him in the files of Truth, Truth, Truth Incorporated. In 1987, Mr. Rodemaker and his stepson were enjoying a father and son outing when they discovered a .222 casing buried in Dealey Plaza, approximately 4 to 6 feet in front of the wooden stockade fence. The casing contained dents. Dr. Paul Stimson of the University of Texas at Houston, a noted forensic odontologist who was recommended to us by the Houston Police Department, examined the .222 casing in his lab. Dr. Stimson issued a written medical legal opinion which states that the dents in the casing are teeth marks. We shared the confession of James E. Files with criminal attorney Don Irving, who agreed to visit Files in an effort to cross-examine Mr. Files to ascertain his validity. In June of 1993, Attorney Irving, a veteran of over 25 years of high-profile criminal cases, spent almost 7 hours with James E. Files at the Joliet prison. Mr. Irving reported that he found no inconsistencies in Mr. Files' confession. Mr. Irving issued a 17-page memo on his cross-examination of James E. Files, and that memo has been included in your information packet for your confidential review. Following his visit with Mr. Files, Attorney Irving negotiated a deal with the FBI and the United States Department of Justice to provide Mr. Files with immunity in order that his testimony could be heard by a special grand jury that was to be called following a non-official visit with Mr. Files, at which Attorney Irving and the FBI were to be present. On August 3, 1993, Attorney Irving informed us that he had received word that the United States Attorney in Chicago had reviewed and approved the immunity agreement for James E. Files. Mr. Irving further stated that the government was to fly him and an FBI agent to the prison for the non-official visit with Mr. Files. On August 9, 1993, 2 Chicago FBI agents made an unannounced visit to Mr. Files without the knowledge or consent of Attorney Irving or the prisoner. Mr. Files informed Attorney Irving that he was asked to agree that Lee Harvey Oswald was the lone assassin of John F. Kennedy. Shortly thereafter, Beaumont Agent Shelton was threatened with the loss of his FBI job and government pension. This fact was verified by both Attorney Irving and newly elected Texas District Judge Charles Carver of Beaumont, Texas. Agent Shelton has failed to respond to our numerous phone calls, and the FBI has twice refused to allow me to interview Agent Shelton on camera. Following the discovery of James E. Files, Truth, Incorporated and Dick Clark Productions entered into a production agreement for a special 2-hour television program. Our program was sold to a major USA television network and scheduled to be broadcast on May 18, 1994. Approximately 3 weeks before the broadcast, a conservative conspiracy researcher, Arthur, who has made a full career out of denying any CIA involvement in the JFK assassination and who blames the assassination fully on the KGB and Oswald, vigorously challenged the project, and the program was placed on hold by the network. It is the intent of Truth, Incorporated to provide the Assassination Records Review Board with a complete and accurate accounting of the entire investigation. The accounting will include all evidence we have gathered. We would like to call your special attention to the medical legal report issued by Dr. Randolph Robertson, a noted radiologist from Nashville, Tennessee. It's included in your packet in full with Dr. Robertson's permission. Dr. Robertson was granted rare access to the autopsy x-rays and photos of JFK, which are in the National Archives in Washington, D.C. During his examination of the skull pictures and x-rays of the president, Dr. Robertson discovered a second bullet wound in the skull. Dr. Robertson's medical legal opinion states that at least one more assassin of President Kennedy remains to be identified. Dr. Robertson further states that the second wound in the skull is consistent with a shot fired from the right front, the grassy knoll area. We ask that the board review our evidence and Dr. Robertson's report, investigate our findings, and release your official opinion of our findings in your final report to the President of the United States and the American public at the end of your term, as is designated in your mandate to which your board was formed. In closing, we ask that you consider recommending to the President and to the American people that a special grand jury be called to hear the testimony of Hugh Early, Robert Tosh Blumey, and most certainly James E. Files. This was the original plan, as per the understanding between Truth Incorporated, Attorney Don Irving, and the United States Department of Justice, according to Attorney Irving. I thank you. I'll be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Vernon. Questions? We appreciate all the materials that you provided.
It's rather lengthy, and there's quite a bit more, and anything else you'd like to see, have Mr. Marwell contact me. There's also quite a bit of video that I think you'd be extremely interested in.
Mr. Vernon, in the
Yes,
course of carrying out your production investigation here, have you come across or have your attention been brought to any records created by any public officials that were held in the hands of those officials that would otherwise be considered to be public documents?
There are quite a few records that we would be happy to give you. Our copies of our copies, some of ours are copies, some are originals. I was glad to see the gentleman from the, I believe it was Texas Tech earlier, the Wagner car stuff. We had access to some of that earlier Wagner car stuff. It was very interesting. We'd be glad to give you what we have there. And there are lots of transcriptions, and there's several other documents. I don't know which you're aware of. We'd be glad to give you some.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vernon.
Thank you, Mr.
Appreciate
Chairman.
your being here today.
Appreciate it.
Thomas Wilson, please. First
I'd like to thank the board for allowing me to come here and make my presentation to you. I'm a private citizen, an American citizen, that's what education I be here today. I have a business installing, food processing, and computer analysis. I'm also qualified in federal court as an expert in the flow of material as related to entrance and exit wounds in a cadaver from images. I have worked on several cases involving murder trial, civil suit, and so forth. My findings have resulted in exhumation of the cadaver to prove that the data was real and verifiable. The cadaver was exhumed and it was verifiable. The thing that I'd like to present to the board today, and I do not mean to demean any agency, it's not my task, but this is the real world. I've worked for many large corporations. Sometimes the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing. And I'd just like to briefly go through my attempts to get articles from the archives. In 1991, I visited the archives and looked at some of the material. I asked for a request for authenticity on several things, and I'll just go through a few articles here. On July 2nd, 1991, I wrote to the National Archives and Records Administration. After consulting with people there, and during my visit to the archives in June, I viewed 2 3/4-inch beta films that was a Zapruder, Nix, and much more films. During my viewing, I requested an established authenticity of where these films came from, where they were copied, who copied them, and the process in which they were copied. In July 1991, I received a letter from the archives, and the board desires if I can have a copy of this. In reply to your letter of July 2nd, we are unable to answer completely all the questions posed to us concerning the administrative history and handling of the originals and various copies. It goes on and it discusses the 3/4-inch copies. This copy of the Zapruder film was received as part of the files of the 1978 House Assassination Committee. It is a 16mm enhanced color copy. Now, I have to tell you, I just hate the word enhanced, because enhanced means that somebody has changed something for the human eye. And the human eye just is not good enough to present evidence in a murder case. So here we have enhanced things being used as evidence for the Warren Commission, for the House Assassination Committee, and these people were trying to make an honest determination based on a false image. So they tend to make other holdings. They have the original 8mm film held as a courtesy and so forth and so on. Final paragraph says, you must realize that while we can trace the provenance and our continuous possession of these materials, since they arrived at our company, we cannot, after these many years, provide names, dates, types of equipment, or copying process. Well, these are the images of the assassination of our president. This boggles my mind. On May 8, 1992, I sent a request in. I have a request under the Freedom of Information Act. FBI photography expert Lyndall Schoenfeld examined photograph exhibits 133A and 133B. My request is for information on the photograph of a person, head removed from the photograph, holding a rifle and simulating pose in exhibit 133A. I asked for a copy of the photograph, the name of the person holding the rifle, the name of the title of the person taking the photograph, the type of camera, the film used, the department that developed it, the exact location where the photograph was taken with a reference to north, south, east, and west. The reason that I asked this is I have analyzed the so-called Harvey Oswald backyard photograph and have been able to establish the time of day that that photograph was taken through various means and this little getting that information. But the interesting part about it is that the FBI reenactment has several qualities within that reenactment that are also in the Lee Harvey Oswald backyard photograph. And this should definitely be explored because there are photographic image anomalies present in public. That was in May 1992. The National Archives wrote me back on May 26th, and they were very responsive. And I thought, oh boy, this is it. Here's what they said. This is in response to your letter, a Freedom of Information Act about the assassinations. We can provide a photographic print of the commission exhibit that you specified at a cost of $6.25. Very efficient. It got me exactly what I wanted. And this is photographs. Now comes the catch-22. I wrote to the director of FBI on June the 5th, 1992. I said, gentlemen, I have a request under the Freedom of Information Act. I talked about Mr. Schoenfeld's analyses. As far as I can tell, and I have his deposition, this is the one gentleman who did the best he could to analyze the information that he had to determine the shots and so forth in the fake or non-fake photographs. I asked the same questions of the FBI. On August 21st, 1992, I got a letter back. This is in reference to your request. This is astounding to me, and I think the board should certainly look into this matter. Efforts were made by FOIA personnel who are familiar with the JFK assassination documents, and they have been unsuccessful in locating the photograph, the one I just showed you. The FBI does not have the personal resources available to conduct the research necessary to locate the photograph you described. The records we currently have processed under the provisions of FOIA are 202,134 pages. If you would please enclose a check for $20,203.40, we will send this information to you. Now, honest researchers trying to get information, and I've worked with some big companies, believe me, I can see what happened. Well, I didn't have the 20,000. I think I would have sent it. See what happened. Okay, so then I wrote to the director of FBI on June the 5th, 1992, and I asked them, I told them where I found the Schoenfeld. I told them that they could have it and file so-and-so for $6.50. I wasn't being facetious. I was trying to make the point that I'm desperate for evidence. No reply. Then, in January 8, 1993, I wrote a letter to Mr. O'Brien at the FBI, chief of the FOI section, excuse me. And the purpose of the letter is to inquire the status of my request that I just mentioned. So this is months have gone by. I would like to take this opportunity to again request your assistance on item H. Since Mr. Schoenfeld did the analysis on the Oswald backyard photograph and the rifle, your department must have a file under his name. I am only interested in the FBI files containing his analyses, techniques, data, and testimony on the photograph and the rifle. I got a letter back saying that there are 84 pages of documents they will send me at no charge because someone else had asked this person and they had it. So I get the impression that the only reason I got 84 pages is because I'm number 2. If I were number 1, I would not have gotten it. And this was free of charge, including transportation. So I'm starting to wonder, I realize our government's trying to help, but this is getting to be a little bit ridiculous. They also sent an explanation of the exemptions, and there are many exemptions. One of the exemptions is listed in the interest of national defense and would disclose techniques and procedures for law enforcement investigations or prosecutions, or would disclose guidelines for law enforcement investigations. And in August of 1993, I got another letter saying that they're sending me 16 photographs, but I never really got the data. And that brings me up to date with why I'm really here. First off, I feel that it's absolutely necessary for me to see the analyses by the FBI of the photographs that they have requested on this assassination. I feel it is absolutely necessary for me to go into the archives and look at the autopsy photos. I have requested Mr. Burke Marshall for 8 months. And I don't want to embarrass Mr. Burke Marshall, but he got back to me recently, and right now he is looking into the possibility of letting me go into the archives to look at the autopsy photographs. If the information contained in the FBI analyses is security-wise, then I would ask for a security clearance of the United States citizens to look at this material. Because what has happened is, for the first 5 years of looking into this situation, and I was drawn into this completely by accident. I am not a research buff. I'm an engineer. I work with facts. I don't have a theory. And since the 25th anniversary, I have found out several things. For instance, Mr. Mack was talking about the married woman photo. I can verify absolutely with hard scientific data that there is a shooter out there on the knoll. No question about it. Mr. Mack and Mr. White were the fathers of that finding, and I will verify that. But in the last year, when I tried to bring this to the public's attention, I decided, you can go and you can prove that Mr. Oswald did this, he didn't do this, all these theories. I'm going to concentrate on one thing, the head wound. That's all I'm going to talk about. And I want to tell you what I have and what I'd like to do by giving this evidence up. I have chain of evidence photographs that were held by private citizens since their inception. They have been signed and dated. Everyone that has touched these photographs is a part of a chain of evidence. This chain of evidence brings out 3 things that I am going to bring to the state of Texas because Mr. Kennedy, our president, was murdered in Texas. Lee Harvey Oswald was here in Texas. Harvey Oswald was arraigned for the murder of the president, as I understand. Now, I've never seen an official document, but I've certainly read it a lot. He was arraigned for murder in Texas. Now, I'm going to bring hard scientific proof, chain of evidence photographs, data of everything I have done, all of the protocol that I have used, which can be reproduced by any agency of the government, anywhere. And I'm going to bring that in the next few months. It's going to prove 3 things positively. Number 1, Lee Harvey Oswald did not fire the shot that hit President Kennedy in the head. If the shot that hit President Kennedy in the head is the fatal shot, then there is still a murderer on the loose. I'm going to prove the direction that the missile came into his head and the damage that was done within the head from these images as chain of evidence. And I'm going to prove what happened to the missile when it struck President Kennedy in the right front forehead. Now, there are 3 things that I would please request the board to do. Number 1, these documents are in various places, so if something happens to Tom Wilson, I want to assure you this will go forward, and I'm not joking. Number 2, I want to let you know that when this evidence is brought forth in Dallas, and there are some people that are going to make the arrangements for me, I would offer the board, any government agency to participate in this, and I would particularly like you to take my message back to the senators from my state, Senator Specter, Senator Walker, and Rick Santorum, who's going to be the next senator. And I can't speak for Marina Oswald Porter, but I want to tell you that this woman has a right to know, did her husband or did her husband not fire the fatal shot? I don't know anything else about Mr. Oswald. So I'm going to request that she get in touch with her senators in Texas. And when this evidence is submitted, it will all be done in a public forum. If there's anything I can help the board members or anything between now and when this is submitted, I'm very happy to do so. But I have the proof, I have it documented, it can be verified, and it is not in theory.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Questions?
Yes, I have a question. What's the status of your FOIA request now?
As of right now, I have not gotten anything from the FBI about seeing Mr. Shaneyfeld's files. I even asked the telephone down there. They were very cooperative, don't misunderstand me. But I said, if Mr. Shaneyfeld's still alive, but we're all getting gray hair going over the hill here, but I said, could I even have an interview with him? I really want to see, I have to say to you that after 30 years of working with this, working on everything in industrial to tremendous forensic work, the things that I see in his analysis, I don't follow him, but that was 30 years ago. And it's wrong, it's flawed. And they will not let me have access to their files. I have not appealed.
What I think would be very helpful to us is if you could provide us a list of the FOIA requests you have made and the status of those requests as you understand them at the moment, including, of course, to whom they were directed.
And should I send this to the same address I sent my initial?
Dr. Marwell will do that.
I'll do that when I get back home shortly.
I'd like to add, our statute does not have the same exemptions as the Freedom of Information Act. It has more exemptions than our statute does. You might want to compare the two. Start looking for exemptions. For postponement in this
How do I get a
case,
copy of these?
it should be in any library that has government documents.
I'm sure Mr. Marwell.
And I'm sure Mr. Marwell can provide you.
If you would send it to me,
that.
I would appreciate it.
Because that's a difference in what will be postponed. There's a difference between being exempt, being totally exempt and postponed also. Under our statute, we postpone.
Now, I realize that your task here also is to locate these images, okay, and right from the subject. You understand these images cannot be given out until they are presented as a chain of evidence in a murder trial. But believe me, they're all documented.
We look forward to that. Mr. Wilson?
Are these images that you described, have they been seen by anyone else? Are they?
The images are they've been seen by the person that owns them, and they've been seen by Dr. Cyril White.
But they are previously unknown to the general public.
Let's say this, they're all known, all these photographs are nothing that hasn't been available through whatever, but that these are chain of evidence photographs. See, in the House committee, when they had the x-rays enhanced for the Assassination Committee, I have a copy of the frontal x-rays. And I can see the terminology down there, and immediately I know how this x-ray was. I'll use the word enhanced. Believe me, you don't ever want to use enhanced in this type of thing. And I can see where they've done, and I'm not going to get into technical jargon, they've done things to average data. And when you average data, you don't have the right thing. So I would like to see the 1978 House Committee, how are they going to analyze it? I understand they hire private firms. If this is really, I can't believe that what I'm doing now, and I'm sure most of the government status there as far as technology, maybe a little bit ahead. I just came from Fondex where Bill Gates talked about some things in the future that I've done in the past couple of years. But if I could just see how the House Committee analyzed those x-rays, if it's detrimental to our country, I would go for a secret clearance and I would not divulge it. But I have to see it. I cannot rest until I see this.
Could you just give us an idea of what you mean by chain of evidence?
Yes, okay. In any trial, if you have a piece of evidence, let's say I got shot and this is my coat, there's a hole in it. Well, if somebody takes this coat, they put it in the bag and they sign I was this coat and so forth and so on, and date it and sign it. Now, forensics wants to look at this hole to see where the hole came in or out, so they take this coat and they give it to John Smith. John Smith signs it and dates it. So that everywhere that this piece of evidence has been, it knows exactly who had it, and when they had it, and where they had it. These photographs have never left the chain of evidence. And I must say that these photographs have been shown throughout the world for 30 years. Everybody's looked at them, and they never saw what's in them. All right, it's not good enough.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson.
The next witness would be Mr. Wallace Millen.
Let me just add, some members of the audience have had trouble hearing some of the witnesses. I'd ask the witnesses to speak directly into the microphone, and if others wish to have conversations during our hearing, perhaps they can go out into the hallway. Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Khan, members of the review board. Appreciate the opportunity to appear here. My name is Wallace Milam. I'm an American history teacher in Dyersburg, Tennessee. I've been a assassination researcher for the past 25 years. Particularly interested in the medical evidence. I want to call your attention to some documents in the medical area which may have fallen or in the danger of falling through the cracks, we might say. I think none of these are particularly esoteric, and they should be all within the ability of this committee to recover. First is a referred House Assassinations Committee document. Oh yes, let me add also that we became aware of the inconsistencies or absences of the complete record here with the recent releases from the National Archives. A letter, a 6-page letter from Dr. Pierre Fink to House Select Committee Counsel Andy Purdy. This 6-page document dated the 26th of February 1978 shows that this document was withheld by authority of the CIA. This document, according to its indexing, contains references to such topics as William Harvey, to organized crime, to anti-Castro activities, and to Jack Ruby. As a person interested in the medical evidence, I was particularly interested and struck by the fact that this was a reference made by one of Kennedy's pathologists. And I wondered what it was that Dr. Fink had to say in a letter to committee counsel before he came to Washington to testify about such non-medical matters. And these pages have been withheld, and I would request that they not be withheld. Their status is reversed, should certainly be removed. We had occasion to meet Andy Purdy last month in Washington, and calling attention to this, his statement was that he was not aware that these were referred, but he was not able to tell us what the content was at that time. The second item also involves Dr. Fink, and incidentally, I brought, I'm afraid, a single copy of each of these, which I will give the committee, including their background. The incomplete House Select Committee assassination document relating to Dr. Fink's second appearance before the medical panel. On March 11, 1978, Dr. Fink testified, along with Dr. James Eversole, gave his testimony to the what has been called the House Assassinations Committee's pathology panel. It was quite a stormy session. We have a transcript of that. And then in a remarkable occurrence, Dr. Fink asked to appear again the next day, even though it was a Sunday. And in his pre-interview, Dr. Fink was again at odds with panel members about the location of a key wound. On page 12 of the second appearance, in mid-sentence, there is a large question mark, and the remainder of the transcript is missing. There is a note on the cover sheet which simply states that ends abruptly, final page missing, and notes the box in the archives from which this document was apparently taken. We know that this was transcribed because we have the verbatim transcript of these early pages. Now, there is some evidence that this hearing, this requested hearing by Dr. Fink went on for nearly 2 hours, and I believe that we have a total of 12 pages. There must have been a great deal more. Certainly when this was transcribed, those who transcribed it were aware of the fact that there was an inconsistency here that ended abruptly. I think this should certainly be looked into. The third item I would call your attention to is another document regarding a tape interview with Mr. Thomas Robinson of Gawler's Funeral Home. Mr. Robinson particularly did the reconstructive work on the head of President Kennedy after the autopsy was completed. This also was taped. We have a transcript. There has been, as I'm sure some of you are aware of, many people in this room are aware of, there's been a great deal of controversy about the method and the manner by which President Kennedy's body moved after he was shot. At one point in the transcript, Mr. Purdy asked Mr. Robinson if there's anything he would like to add to the record, or actually his quote was that he had heard or read some things which struck you as incorrect. What would those things be? The record taken from the tape is as follows, quote, "The time the people moved," in parentheses, autopsy, "the body was taken, deleted, and the body never came," lots of little things like that. The next question by Mr. Purdy says, "Thank you," essentially, "Thank you," and we will move on to another area. Now, first of all, I don't know how people speak in parentheses. The word autopsy is in parentheses, obviously inserted by someone else. That tape should exist also. And obviously, the tape doesn't end there. There is more. We made a request or an effort this summer to acquire the tapes, which we promised would be available. We have not been able to acquire that tape. Another item also involves a tape. In this case, it involves Mr. Samuel Bird. Mr. Bird was the head of the casket team, which managed and was in charge of carrying the casket and ceremonial details during that weekend. Mr. Bird is known to have recorded a tape soon after. We have that not only from House Assassination Committee verified that fact, we've also told by Mr. Richard Lipsey, told the House Assassinations Committee that he was aware of Samuel Bird's tape recording. An effort was made in 1978, and I will submit the documentation. Mr. Bird was contacted in Wichita, Kansas, and a notation was made from the outside contact report, quote, "Bird said he would review the tape over the weekend, and then I could call him on Tuesday, February 21, 1978, and see what the tape contains." There is evidence that the tape was acquired. It is a contemporaneous document. Bird recorded this within a week of having performed these activities as part of the weekend. I would urge the committee to acquire that tape. And finally, something which I did not note, I have noted in writing to, I believe, Mr. Tunham and members of the committee before. We were, in the research community, were somewhat surprised a few years ago, just a short time ago, in the publication of historian Michael Beschloss's book, The Crisis Years, in that he references the fact that he interviewed Richard Helms of the CIA, and Helms told him that President Johnson was not satisfied with the Warren report or wanted further investigation done, and that late in 1964, he asked the CIA to conduct its in-house investigation, and that among the things which were done was the acquisition of a copy of the Zapruder film and the autopsy materials, which were then analyzed. Now, there is some evidence that CIA did acquire a copy of the Zapruder film. Researchers are aware of the fact that the FBI wrote to the Warren Commission saying that CIA had asked to acquire a copy of the film, quote, "for training purposes." And it occurred to many of us that this may have been the ruse by which the CIA obtained a copy to conduct its in-house investigation. On another aspect of that, if indeed the CIA acquired the autopsy materials in late 1964, it would mean that the CIA had access to the autopsy materials fully 2 years before any other government agency examined them officially, before the official study was made by the autopsy, those who participated in the autopsy pathologist. And it should also mean that there should be a mountain of generated materials relating to this investigation.